So for continue. All right, so for this particular session, there are a couple points we are gathered to discuss. One is, American Hindus, meaning Hindus who are not necessarily the Indian origin or have this life roots in India, either by the parents or they are born there. And they are doing their pujas and yagnas and Hindu rituals and other practices. How can they contribute in this ongoing practice or struggle, not practice, I would say struggle, to help the civilization which feed this tree and nurture us all with its fruits and the shade of dharma to fulfill, whether it's our personal level fulfillment, our emotional, psychological, and just able to deal with the present day, chaos in every way. How can they get involved? And some of them are involved currently, but not enough to make a bigger impact. So how can American Hindus help the civilization which protects the tree right now, because that's where the tree roots are. And we all know any tree, when we will water the roots, protect the roots, more it grows, better fruits it gets, and every life form which is dependent on that, they also flourish. So how can they do that in the terms of, when we say metaphor of the tree, socio-economic, political scene, and all kind of attacks, and help the dharma to prevail?
Should I go first?
Sure.
Hi, first, just in case nobody knows who I am, my name is Sam Geppi, and I'm a longtime yoga teacher, also Vedic astrologer. I've written several books. One of them is called Yoga and Vedic Astrology. It's actually available in India as well through The Art of Living. You can buy the book there if you're seeing this in India. But to your question, Rashmi, really that's the big issue right now, is how to best live in alignment with Dharma in a world that needs it more than ever. At the beginning, we saw the 9/11 and planes flying in the buildings and all kinds of things. Something else happened on September 11th, but in 1893, Swami Vivekananda came and spoke in Chicago. That was also on September 11th, but it was 1893. And that was another kind of, I guess, sort of jihad, but it was against the ego. It was the sort of very beginning of Indian Sanatana Dharma and these great teachings coming to the West to take on our voracious ego, the ego of attachment, materialism, and all of those things. And since then, Westerners have had the opportunity to learn yoga, also Ayurveda, also meditation, kirtan, all of these practices, including, Vedic astrology, like what I mainly have been known for. And the biggest thing that Western Hindus, as you would say, whether they identify as Hindu or not, which is more of a religious denomination, but Western spiritual practitioners of Indian sciences, the main thing they need to do is actually practice and not just have it be an intellectual exercise. One of the things that we have in this world now is this hyper attraction toward information and data as if it's practice. We have this illusion that if I read a book, I've done something. Now, reading a book is helpful because you need to know what you're doing and understand why you would do it. Like, it's valuable to read the Bhagavad Gita. It's valuable to read the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. It's valuable to read one of my books or one of Mas Vidal's books, but it's only really valuable in as much as you put that knowledge into practice. The Bhagavad Gita gives a great background on how Lord Krishna instructed Arjuna, but he didn't say, listen to what I say. Krishna said, do what I'm telling you to do. Sit there and meditate and do these practices. And so as we do these practices, there's a revolution of consciousness that happens with each individual, and then it spreads from individual to individual, then through the communities, and then hopefully throughout the whole world. And so I choose to really remember that more than anything else on 9/11 was the beginning of Swami Vivekananda's instruction of and him bringing yoga and Indian teachings to the West. And the main thing I would say to Western Hindus, or those who identify as those who practice Indian spirituality, is to have it be a practice, not just an intellectual exercise.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, those are wonderful words, Sam. That's, I think, the cornerstone of these traditions is sadhana. I think that Adi Shankara made a very powerful point when he said, Satsanga twe, nihasanga twam, nihasanga twe, nidmoha twam, nidmoha twe, nishala twam, nishala twe, jiva mukti. That satsang, community that abides in truth, that listens to truth, is the most important thing. We can't do it alone. And what a blessing that we have this global Hindu Sangha happening to come together to remind us of how powerful this tradition is. I think we have definitely huge obstacles here in the West to practice a culture. This is what I often tell people, that Hinduism is not a religion, it is a culture. And it is a relationship that people have with all living things. It's a relationship that people have more than anything, not just with each other, but with this planet, with Earth. The Earth is sacred. The Earth is Bhumi Devi. The Earth is Mother. And these traditions remind us of how important it is to recognize that everything is divine, and there's a divine essence in all living things. And that's what drew me as a Westerner to this tradition, because Christianity doesn't provide that. The Abrahamic traditions follow the teachings of one individual. And this tradition is not about one person. There are many, many great scriptures, so many that I think this is another challenge that we have. There are so many great scriptures in our tradition now that it leads us into the challenge of all the misinterpretations that we're getting of those scriptures. And especially from people that aren't trained to interpret an ancient Vedic text, Sanskrit text. And this is, in a way, almost sad because it's bound to happen. And what Sam was saying is we have to practice. Yes, practice and do it as a community. And as I said earlier on Saturday morning for the introduction, we have to connect to our lineages. We have to connect to the sampradayas, where the teaching is pure, where the Shakti is being passed from guru to disciple. This guru Shishya Parampara tradition is very important. And I'm optimistic that as long as we keep connecting to those lineages, that this tradition will overcome the challenges that we still have, no doubt, the remnants of colonialism, the remnants of violence and oppression. And yes, those things are still there, but thankfully, it was Vivekananda ushered in a whole boatload of great lineages that are now in Renaissance. They're alive and here, and fortunately accessible to us, to all of us. So,
Well said.
yeah.
Thank you. It's really well said, Mas. However, I would like to point one more thing, when we talk about colonization and the impact, because we cannot deny, we cannot simply, hide and pretend that somehow we are over the colonization. In fact, it's coming out in a neo-colonization, form now. And what's been happening, that most of the people, just like what Sam said, involved more so into intellectualism and also somewhat escapism. It's not my problem. They divide human beings into, okay, that is that country, this is this country. I align with this political party, that political party. About this is where exactly is aligning with dharma. And even when we talk about a lot of misinterpretation from people supposedly being the holder or the power holder who we should trust, either they are straight up, descendant of colonizers since, the time, whether Marx or Mr. Macaulay, like, both late gentlemen from there, or people who are colonized, Indian origin. And that practice, which started bashing the pagan and showing how dirty Indian or, like in Native Americans are in Mesoamerica, how they are treated as, that engine who are need to be civilized. That's the exact same thing with Hindus. So that misinterpretation is still that part of that. So the point what Sam made, that we need to put all this in the practice meaning, and regardless of whatever sampradaya we follow, all sampradaya at one time or not have to come down on the ground and just stand with satya. Stand with what is true, not what is true by the interpretation of media or one political power or other political power, whether it's in American continent, European continent, Australian continent, or motherland India. For all of us Hindus, motherland is India, because that is where, unfortunately, that's a tiny land mass, which is called India from what it used to be. This is the only place remaining where these lineages and all that were able to get preserved. And none of us will do any action, and action also require actively participating in everything, of course, by our karma, showing our example, but like it or not, just like Arjun, he have done in the Kurukshetra physical violence, and he paid for it through his karma. After the war ended, all the Pandavas also have to suffer, because even if it's done for dharma, they have to still live this, and we all have to do in this lifetime, maybe next. And from the time where a lot of our parampara, a lot of our literature, sacred literatures were written, which most of them are from Satyuga, Dwapar, Treta, and now we are in Kali Yuga, where the worst of the humanity, unfortunately, is out. It's even become more need of the time to put our foot down.
So I'll just go here. Look, you're absolutely right. And one of the biggest things that has happened now is, since the proliferation of these great sciences into the West, of course, they mix with Western misunderstanding, Abrahamic culture, Judeo-Christian theology, and of course they get misinterpreted. And so one of the things that I'm very passionate about in my work is the need to defend these teachings. They need to be defended. They need to be defended, especially by the people who practice them, who are on the cutting edge. We have these arguments and these disagreements that seep in. And unfortunately now what has also happened is that even within these communities, people are a little too passive. They just kind of like, well, let's all be tolerant and open. Look, these sciences are very malleable in one sense. Yoga, Ayurveda, they accommodate Jyotish, astrology, Vastu, all of them, they accommodate many, many different new innovations and whatnot. But at heart, they are still very, they need to be pure. So for example, when you see things like a different style of asana that can connect with a different way to open the energy centers, but it still retains the purity of the lineage where you're still operating through asana, pranayama, pratyahara, ahimsa, and the tenets, let's say, of Ashtanga yoga. Well, doing a different variation on asana, for example, or even pranayama is acceptable. Doing something different, like, let's say, I saw a thing called drunk yoga, where people drink wine and do asana and call it drunk yoga. Now, this is just too far, because now the word yoga is being used to elicit interest in something because people want to do yoga and they want to drink. Now, that kind of thing is just, that's not the intention. That's not what we're talking about. Because if you just said drunk exercise, nobody would care. If you say drunk yoga, oh, I'm doing yoga and we're having fun. Again, so these kinds of things need to be delineated. The other thing, though, I also want to be careful of, though, is I know, because I've been on the front lines of this for more than 20 years, is to be patient with people as they learn what these sciences are. For example, even someone who maybe comes into yoga through something called drunk yoga, look, it needs to be called out so that people understand this is not actually yoga. But who knows, that person now in their mind are doing this thing called yoga, they're going to now be very open to actual yoga, in the sense that, I saw, especially in the early 2000s, the proliferation of what was called Bikram yoga, which again is very different than the traditional asana practice. And so many people I know personally came into the yoga tradition through that practice. And within no time, they were actually doing more heart-centered Ashtanga classical yoga. I actually started doing the yoga from the tradition of Swami Shivananda, which is very clean, pure asana, holistic yoga of synthesis based. And many of the people that I studied with had a very strong reaction to like the Bikram, because it wasn't the pure thing. And I always realized, you know what, that's okay. So we have to be careful also labeling people as colonizers, because it can also turn people off. So it's a very delicate balance between honoring the traditions and the practices, being tolerant, and also practicing ahimsa ourselves, and not being violent against people who are doing their best, but maybe just don't understand. So we need to be, both vigilant and armed with that sword like Arjuna, but also have a soft heart and be compassionate for people who want to learn and just need to be educated. And I find with myself, education is always the key. People just need information. Even the person teaching drunk yoga, you don't need to come down on them with a ton of bricks. They probably are just ignorant. They don't understand, or whatever it might be. And then that's really the light of yoga that's burning, is the compassion for everyone. So they need to be defended, but we also have to be careful not to be offensive. At least that's my view, and that's what I strive toward. I don't always succeed myself.
That's a great view, Sam. Thank you.
You're certainly welcome.
Also, yes, you're absolutely right. Divine timing is everything. And labeling people as colonizers or colonized, unfortunately, that labeling is not done recently. That happened because of colonization, and recognizing and calling what that is, whether somebody who is even blood family and they are on the path of adharma, is calling what that is not a bad thing. Yes, it could be, described more gently, or maybe.
I mean, when it's not appropriate, because sometimes, and again, especially online and whatnot, I have seen many times where someone just innocently makes a mistake, and then the wrath of God comes upon them because of all the sins of the past and how it refers to. I'm just talking about being appropriate with the languaging, not when it's not when it's appropriate. Sorry to interrupt, but that's what I meant.
You are absolutely right. And it has a lot to do with also the language itself. Because for people who are English as a first, language speakers versus people who speak English as second or third or fourth or fifth or sixth, like myself, the choice of words will be not always same.
Right.
And that's also why your point of people being on the ground and participating and debate in entire indigenous Hindu knowledge system, whether it be Ayurveda, yoga, Tantra, just name it, Vedanta, anyone, debating always been something very common. I grew up in a mata system and grew up in actually ashram. So lot of debating, and sometimes debating get very passionate, but nobody pulling out gun like Wild Wild West where I am right now in Pacific Northwest, or pulling out, like beating each other up. Passion is okay. Passion is completely okay. This is how we all find a space. Yes, online become more tricky and more so on this, pandemic time, because people have unfortunately not much to do, and it's easy to just go attack. But that should not. If we put ourselves also out online, we should find also time to explain that. If somebody coming down, and it happens with me from all angles, and I'm sure Mas have dealt with similar situation. All of us, anytime you are in public, regardless of whatever views you're going to say, whether for dharma, against dharma, there will be. So it become a duty to explain, or sometime deflect, or maybe keep quiet till the right time comes and put your point forward. So with that, I would ask Mas to say what your opinion or your thoughts.
Well, I'm an optimist, and as I've said, I was born in the West, but who knows how many incarnations any of us have spent in India. And, so what matters the most ultimately is how can we continue to set an example for a society, particularly in the West, that doesn't have much of a clue of what moksha or enlightenment or samadhi is, that was all removed from the major religions. So their goal or their intention of life is very different. And what's happening now, and in our view, Rashmi, we're not in the Kali Yuga, we're in the Dwapara Yuga. We follow the work that Swami Sri Yukteswar did to correct the miscalculation, and actually Dwapara Yuga began in 1700, and often much of the points that I make are related to we're in an ascending age. Why? Because we're seeing yoga spread all over this world. Ramakrishna, in my view, ushered that in to this era. He and Sharda Devi. And if you look at history, just in the last 120 years, we've had a massive shift in yoga spreading all over the world. Ayurveda is following. Yoga centers exist all over this country and all over the world. They're doing Hatha Yoga. We know that's a Hindu practice. They're doing meditation. That's a Hindu practice. They're promoting vegetarianism. We know that that is a cultural Hindu practice. They're wearing the clothes and they're being very much attracted to this culture because there is a dire need for it. And when you're seeking truth, when humans are seeking truth, it cannot hide, right? as it, you will find it wherever it needs to be. And thankfully now, it's very accessible. In just the last 20 years, I opened my center in Los Angeles, Dancing Shiva, which is, I consider it more of a cultural center. We taught all of the Vedic wisdom practices. I saw a person come in, never do yoga before, and then they're studying Ayurveda, they're becoming vegetarian, they're learning about what their correct astrology sign is. They're learning the proper way and approach to do this, and they're taking it into their homes. They're taking it and sharing it with their friends. And one person transformed, I can think of so many, would bring 20 people behind them. And this effect, fortunately, is happening. I've seen this even in India. I teach in India as well, at universities, and I'm seeing this change there. I'm seeing the interest in even the concept Hindutva, even though we know it is Hinduism, but seeing people carrying Savarkar's book around on Hindutva and seeing those books in bookstores at the airport, there is a force, there is a huge change that is occurring right now. And it is not coincidental that we're all here. Took 900, 1,000 years for the devastation that occurred to Bharat. And in just 100 so years, look at how much has changed. And I know that we are still challenged, and that's part of the battle. That's part of Maya. This world is never going to be perfect. It's designed to prod us to search, to seek. And yes, we have our responsibility to respect and support the tradition. And myself, like many others, have been drawn to this tradition because it represents a holistic package. It includes everything you could imagine. And nothing has in this world compares to that. There's nothing really that we can compare to that. And that is the beauty of this tradition. And fortunately, we're evolving at a pace now that is much faster. And thankfully, it has much to do with the cycles of change, the cycles of consciousness. There are cycles. And I'll end with this, before there was religion, there was tradition, there was culture. And these last 2,000 years, 2,500, have been the most barbaric in probably all of human history, just going back to the beginning of the last ice age. And this change that's occurring right now is representative of this new movement, this new change that is occurring. And I'm grateful. And I one of the notes that I saved for this, and I think we have, as a Hindu community, a couple of very important entry points to expand this work. One, because we're seeing academia against us, because we're seeing the media against us, because we're seeing even government, in many respects, the liberal government against us, we can go to the yoga schools. There are thousands upon thousands of yoga schools. And I know we can criticize them as being fitness and being very, very basic in their representation of Hinduism. However, they are laboratories where people are going with an open heart, looking for answers, looking for reparation, looking for healing from the damage of capitalist culture, from the remnants of colonialism, because it's still intact. I witnessed this just being raised here as a brown boy in the West and going to a university here. And I wasn't given a free will to choose how I wanted to seek God. When I started to go away from Christianity, I was criticized, I was judged, and I was told that I was going in the wrong direction. But I didn't listen. I followed my heart. And yoga, fortunately, began to open that for me. And I'm really grateful to be a part of this evolution and this change. And I have to say, you know, Sam has also done a lot of very good work in this way, specific with the astrology. He's really presented some clear corrections that were also part of colonial influence. They were done to change and control a people. And now this is beginning to change, but still people are confused about that. They still think that they're a sign that they're not. There's so many of these confusions that are only in the last 10 to 20, 30 years being corrected. And even the Kali Yuga concept was an error. It was a misconception. And there was also colonial involvement there, empirical involvement there, to downtrodden the people and make them believe that we're in a dark place, that there's only doom and gloom. But Babaji asked Yukteswar to make that change and to write a treaty and correct it. And many astrologers now, and Sam can correct me on this, are following this trend, that we are in an ascending movement. We are in an ascending direction. And yes, technology is here. You know, that is a Dwapara byproduct, right?
If I can say just real quick, a few things. In particular, I appreciate what you're saying. And of course, you know, one thing people should understand, that Mas and I are really kind of on the cutting edge of seeing all of these transformations happening within people. He's, you know, Mas is referring to the same thing that I said earlier, that although we need to defend these teachings, we need to draw a distinction between a quality of yoga that is not honoring what is even in, you know, the spirit of Patanjali or whatnot, you know, but we also can't reject, because people, as Mas said beautifully, they're going to these centers with open hearts. They're seekers. They're seekers, and I've seen so many transformed, even though they're doing this kind of yoga that's just asana based because they want to have a nice looking body. It takes nothing for them to then jump into something like studying Jyotish, Vedic astrology, which is the most abstract, crazy thing a Westerner could ever conceive of. You mean the fact that I'm just spirit that's descended into form with karma? And sometimes in one conversation with me, they're studying the most revolutionary thing you could ever imagine. And so I see this all the time, and so does Mas. This is why there really has to be this kind of, you know, we have to be careful and not lose connection with the heart of the seeker. Swami Shivananda said that there are many different kinds of seekers, and there's one that are like rocket fuel. And many times those are the people that are in the yoga centers. Those are the ones that are in the yoga centers that all they need to do is hear the truth spoken. And when you hear the truth spoken with an unrelenting straightness, where you're speaking right to the Atman in someone, you're not trying to dumb it down and hope it's politically correct, or I don't want to offend you, but you're actually spirit taken form, and you just go right for the thing, just like Krishna does in the Bhagavad Gita. He doesn't fool around with Arjuna. He says, look, just like the soul changes, or just like the body changes clothes at the end of one day and puts on another, so does the soul do the same thing. Arjuna wasn't ready for that answer. So, but Krishna was speaking right to the Atman, right to the supreme self in that person. And when you speak to the Atman in someone, the Atman in them recognizes it, because we're all the Atman. We're just under the illusion that we're this ego and all of this information and all this data. That's just an illusion. When one Atman speaks to another through these divine sciences, because the sciences themselves have the truth. You just speak the truth, and then those people that are in these yoga centers or taking these classes and they're under these delusions, you cut right through the delusion immediately, because the soul recognizes it.
Right, Brother Sam and Mas, both of you are preaching to the choir.
No, well, I'm saying that these are the things that really, that in practice, that we all, as students of Hinduism, need to also keep in mind.
Absolutely. And there is no doubt, seekers are just seekers. Seekers don't know. But people in question are not the seekers. People in question are people who hold themselves as somebody authoritative and completely abuse and create a new narrative. I'm sorry, I should have introduced myself in the beginning too. My name is Rashmi Tantra, and I do teach my lineage, Shaktitva, Shakta Tantrism, and here in US and in India. And I taught also, not do I like to say festivals, but that kind too. And a lot of workshops and events and public speaking, and I coach based on traditional Hindu knowledge, mainly Tantra, but also I do applied Ayurveda and other stuff too. And I have seen that in the classes. But when you have discussions, one, debate and discussions, that could be always encouraged. In all our classes, we have time given, allotment actually, after the classes, little tea time, everybody sit and talk and put their views forward. And confusion not going to go away. And a lot of confusion because of mistranslation. You're absolutely right. And seekers were never, bombarded. It was just because there are some people who show up as authoritative. And if, as a Hindu, especially American Hindus living here, we will not hold those people accountable, then it's not only that just the teaching get distorted, people also get attacked with violence. In California, if I will mention here, twice in last 17 years, I have been about to be burned, being called witch and being burned by so-called New Age community and, of course, very Judeo-Christian, community. One was also from my own in-laws side, which did not like the fact that I'm not teaching, quote unquote, American approved yoga or anything. I'm taking people away from the Lord, including my white Hindu husband. So if all of us will not start speaking, then there are people who are speaking, they don't get support. And it have to be simple, could be nonviolent protest, could be holding, if we see somebody, again, this term is not my favorite, but unfortunately it is there, yoga briddies. Some of them have done incredible job. And some of them, they just there for name and fame and paycheck. People, as long as you know your intention and heart aligned with the dharma, you all good. We all find modification for teaching. The same dharma teachings could be asana, could be, even a pranayamic, technique, or even in Jyotish to find way to describe some message you're trying to pass. And everything is valid, yes, in dharma for seekers. But question comes to not the seekers. It's more about the people who are, showing up as authority and hijacking the narrative and telling, and it's not just the white Hindu community, it's also the children who are now in free India. Like myself, I am second generation in free India in this our present time. And a lot of people I see around are also following the narrative which is getting repackaged from America. So it's to address that too, and it's our duty. Would you not say that? To be
Well, that was the
more
first thing I
vocal.
said. So I already said it right away. I said these are practices, and I'm the one who brought up like the drunk yoga or whatever. I totally get it. And I also totally get how, for example, in Vedic astrology now, which is a clearly what's called sidereal tradition based on the sidereal zodiac that's been aligned with the stars thousands of years, been aligned with the sections of space. Within the last 10 years or so, there's just been a movement, a group of people that say, no, it's supposed to be tropical. And not only that, but they go back and say that it's because the Indians made all these mistakes and didn't know what they were doing. None of it is true. So again, I'm one of the only astrologers who actually has pushed back against that with a lot of force. And I happen to be the only one who will do it. So look, when you speak about these things, I'm on the front lines of these kind of things myself. And so I completely agree with you. The same with the yoga teachers. What happens now is people are so afraid, especially online, of having anonymous people yell at them on YouTube or something that they won't speak up. And this is my literal experience of trying to get my colleagues also into speaking up about these things that they know are also not factual, but they won't do it because they're afraid. So I wind up speaking, and then I have like the 10 people who are against it screaming at me and no one else on my side, even though everyone on my side who I know just won't speak up because they're afraid to speak up. So this is why it's one of the main things that I said is you're absolutely right. We need to defend these traditions when we see that. And that includes the practitioners and the teachers need to defend these, or else they get watered down and then they become a farce. And not to mention what you're talking about, which is very sad, that it can even lead to physical altercations and other things.
Would you say that as practitioners and students of different, stream in the indigenous Hindu knowledge, whether, Jyotish, Vedanta, whichever sampradaya or teachings we all are following and teaching, and also making our livelihood with that too, there comes a time and there is a place for actually physically get involved. For example, I said protest. When there's something wrongful we see, this does not require any violence, but simply using your body as being present physically at a location to hold somebody accountable. Let be a media channel, let be a politician, let be anyone, versus just only speaking online. Will that be something doable? And should we, as a Hindu Americans, should we show courage to do that?
Well, Rashmi, what comes up for me is, as our yoga tradition teaches us, there are different types of people. There are some of us that are more of the practical type, more active bent. That type of person is more likely to go do a march or do something like that, something demonstrative. There are devotional types or emotional types. We refer to them as bhaktas. There are more intellectual types that are drawn to knowledge and writing and maybe a little bit more on the intellectual side, jnanis, and the Raja yogis, those that are drawn to spirituality, to the practice of sadhana, ashtanga. So it all depends. Most important than anything else is that each person find what is unique to their constitution, where their strengths are, and how do you connect with that energy that you need to express? Is it practical? Is it intellectual? Is it devotional? Is it spiritual? And if you align with one of those four, then find that path. As you do, the other aspects of yourself start to develop. And that's where this tradition is so beautiful. Truth is one.
Absolutely.
The scriptures call it by many names.
And you'll see a convergence as well, because then perhaps like the intellectual types will put out the ideas that get the more physical types to show up, that get the more devotional types to pray or whatever. All of it is, there are no mistakes in Dharma, and there are different types of whether it's protest or speaking out or being devoted or what, all of it works. The puja is one of the most powerful things that ever happens, even though nobody might see it. Thank God that the rishis and these priests all around the world are doing pujas, or who knows what kind of world we would have. As bad as we say it is now, imagine a world where there weren't pandits all over the world doing pujas all the time.
Absolutely. And you can do some of the pujas like, ISKCON. And few other sampradayas that do too, openly out and showing that, look at our beautiful culture, but more visibility on the ground. You could be a bhakta on the ground. We all could be outside our own studios or ashrams or retreats, whatever, we have.
I never leave the house anymore. I do everything online except to play tennis. So, okay.
Oh, honey, I live in the middle of the forest. Yet, when dharma,
I do everything online. I'm.
So you can influence others.
That's what I'm saying. That's why my whole life is.
One of the, I think these conferences are very important. As an Ayurvedic doctor practitioner, one of the things that I mention to people that is the most practical, that is the easiest thing that we can do, is first start by treating your body kindly. The body is sacred. The body is a temple. What we put into it is important. Following a vegetarian diet can be very, very helpful to not only the body, but to the planet. We know that can make a big difference. It also changes the demeanor, the constitution, the vibration of a person when they care for their body, because they realize that the body carries the Devi. The body is born of Bhumi. So we all have to begin by treating our bodies in a very healthy way, in a natural way. There's so many avenues to implementing Dharma and to resisting the challenges we have as a culture today. But yet millions of people today are running towards vaccines, right? As that is the solution, because that's what the government is convincing people to do. But yet Ayurveda has been helping and healing people for thousands of years to live over 100 years of age, average. Charak mentions it in the scripture.
You're right, brother, but even vaccine and this kind of a worm is another topic, perhaps for another session.
Yes, I understand.
Yes.
But my point is that people will not need to do those things if they eat a better diet, if they create Sangha and eat at home. All of these are Hindu practices. But
absolutely, even inoculation or vaccine is also, if you goes back, a certain kind, but like I said, it's a whole another can of worm. But let's come back to the topic. We are here and we have about 10 minutes remaining. Are you guys ready to take some questions?
Sure.
From listeners?
As long as it's not, hey, in my chart, I always get the astrology questions. What does it mean that I have Saturn in the third house?
No, for that, people can contact you directly. And I think whatever we do for work, we should appropriately get compensated for that too.
Well, it's not the compensation, it's just that I can't do it. It's like someone to ask you to do a doctor's appointment through, anyway.
Absolutely,
just joking.
compensation don't always happen in money. Our viewers, anybody have any questions from this session, everything we discussed about this particular session? If you do, please write it down on the chat and we will take it from there and go forward and unmute, us or mute us.
People can raise their hands, I can unmute. But while they do that, I have a question. How do you guys tell people that meditation and mindfulness are indeed part of yoga. And there are many more steps before you even get to that, meaning yama, niyamas, things like that. So what is the best way to educate someone that, hey, this is also yoga? Because there's people try to kind of tease out meditation or mindfulness as something that is Buddhist and not Hindu. So I would love to get everyone's opinion.
I'll make a brief point because this has been a big part of my work. Not everyone is ready to start with meditation. They need first maybe orientation with their body.
Hmm?
They need to get grounded and calm first. If you ask a person to sit in meditation without preparation,
Yeah.
then it's not meditation.
Right.
They're just playing with the monkey in their mind. However, we present meditation with an integral process, meaning the proper steps, the proper diet, the preparation, so that they can benefit from meditation. So I have always taught, as I was trained, to teach an integral approach. We don't just teach meditation alone. Meditation is part of a holistic package. Most people I know aren't prepared to meditate. And all they do is think about their groceries and movies while they're trying to meditate. It's because they're not following an integral process. And this is what I had taught in my center for 12 years. You were not allowed to come to any yoga class, hatha yoga class, without meditating before you left. Everyone did it. And if you didn't, then you weren't allowed to come to the center. It was a requirement. But we taught them how to connect to their body, how to calm their breath, how to use the mind as an instrument, as a tool to go beyond that.
Absolutely. You have said very beautifully, I think, on behalf of many practitioners.
I'll just say sorry.
I'm sorry, Sam, go ahead, please.
No, I'll just say really quick, in my work, when I do consultations, I'm mainly explaining to people why they're not meditating, because I know that most of them are not. I just already know this. And I also explain to them how yoga and even when we use the word meditation, we're actually talking about dharana, dhyana. They're actually steps that come after. I mean, we could start with the yamas and then the yamas, but the part of sitting down on the mat and of stilling the mind through things like asana, things like pranayama, even things like chanting mantra, all of these are preparations for a state of meditation that would be what you would call mindfulness or whatnot. And the fact that they're not doing those other things is the reason they can't meditate. So I'll often say, the reason you're having a hard time meditating is because you're just trying to take your rajasic monkey mind and plop it down on a mat, and you haven't done any preparation. It's the same thing that Mas just said. So I tell them, this is why you can just do a simple breathing and mantra practice, just to try to get them used to what it feels like to have a mind that is a little bit calmer than what they're used to. Because most people have no concept of what it is when the mind is even a little bit calm. So I'll just say, even a simple mantra, breath alignment, like Om when you inhale, Om when you exhale, or you have a mantra to a favorite deity, Om Namah on the inhale, Shivaya on the exhale, or just something to connect their mind to the breath, and especially to a mantra as well, will start to introduce a level of calmness in their mind. So at least it's a bridge. So it gives them a glimpse of what's possible. And then, of course, something like an actual yoga asana practice, where you can literally connect that now with strategic alignments that open up the chakras and whatnot. So then by the time you sit down, you're already in meditation. It's not even you don't even have to try. And of course, there's other ways to do that too, saying long mantras like the Lalita Sahasranam. Like, after you've said 1,000 mantras, you don't have to ask how to meditate. Your mind is you're already so expansive in your consciousness that you're already so present after that. So the practices themselves prepare the mind for that state. And so that's all I would say. So I just explain that to people.
Absolutely. Both of you said the same thing through practical modalities. You guide the students step through step, and that's the right way of doing it. Next question is from Manav. He's asking how to calm the wandering mind. And I think you just answered that question just now while Manav, you were writing this question. Do you have, of course, we don't have that much time to explain further, but did you get a little glimpse of what these brothers are trying to explain? Practical things, of course, but they are trying to explain right now in such a short time frame that a simple chanting of mantras connecting with our prana could also calm the wandering mind in initial stages. And as we become more or gain more mastery on ourselves, because really that's the only thing to master, that could help. We have another question coming from Namar Naka. How can we bust the propaganda used for Abrahamic polarization on mass scale? How do we make Abrahamic understand that kafirs and infidels do go to hell or are not under influence of Satan?
Don't go to hell.
What do you
Yeah.
have to say about that?
Well, I would say, listen, if you know the law of karma and everyone has to live by that law, nobody gets away with doing anything negative, anything violent. At some point, that karma has to work itself out in that person. If you trust in that process, the divine will take care of the rest.
Including the ones who are doing the things that you don't like. There's no reason to hate them, demonize them, or do anything to them. Their karma is a self-contained law. The sadness is seeing a person so wrapped up in ignorance that they might think that perpetrating violence or anger at another is some solution. Now, again, that doesn't mean that we're passive in the face of it, but it also doesn't mean we have to hate them or meet it with the same kind of violence. Karma will take care of it. That's what it is. And that's what gives us the capacity to surrender and not be attached. This is literally what Lord Krishna was saying.
Absolutely. And if it's not a physical violent threat to you,
right,
for your own peace of mind, you can
right.
tell people, as I say typically, welcome to the dark side. We got
right.
cookies.
Exactly.
Any other questions? We have a little bit more time, so if there is no other questions, we will like to thank both of you and all our listeners and everybody
Thank
who
you.
found time to join this and make this global Hindu-American conference worthwhile for everybody.
Yes,
yes,
I want to say a deep thanks, especially to Anjali Swami, who encouraged me and mentioned this to me to get involved, and for Sam for being courageous enough to take my suggestion to help support this very important cause as a Dharma brother and as a yogi. And I would like to just say that I'm very grateful. I have practiced and visited many conferences and festivals. And I have to say that I was very impressed and had a great appreciation for the knowledge that was expressed here in this conference. I was humbled so many times by the knowledge and the deeper understanding that I gained by attending it. And so I hope that we will continue to do more of these and promote Sangha. To me, this is Satsanga. And so that we can, as a community, grow together and help overcome the challenges that are always going to be there. But together, we can do better.
Absolutely. And all of the practitioners, we are here practicing, we have also opportunity to invite whoever speakers or whoever one of our brothers or sisters and the Dharma happened to be in the city, to maybe invite them in our studios to have them speak on the topic which our students or practitioners might not have heard, or we don't want them to hear from us necessarily, maybe get another, perspective. And that could also, I think, help to increase the awareness, because we all know how the ripple effect works as it's working right now.
If I can also say that I thank Moss for inviting me, letting me know, and Angela Swami for all the back and forth and coordinating this, and Rashmi for your very skilled moderation here as well. It was a pleasure for me to speak, and I hope it was of service to people.
Absolutely. Thank you, brothers. And thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Namaste.
Namaste. Jai Shri Ram.